Hello, and welcome to our webinar about pension insurance in Finland. My name is Lotta Aaltonen, and I work as a legal specialist in Varma's Insurance Services.
Welcome on my behalf. My name is Arja, and I work here at Varma with different kinds of insurance-related questions, both national and international.
So here is a list of the topics that we will cover today. We'll start with an overview of the Finnish pension system. We'll then talk more specifically about pension insurance for employed persons and self-employed persons. We'll also talk about the differences between employees and self-employed persons for the purposes of pension insurance legislation, and also how a decision is made regarding the applicable pension insurance legislation. And then lastly, we will briefly talk about pension insurance legislation in international situations.
So we will start with the characteristics of the Finnish pension system. Each country has its own pension system, and there are a lot of differences between the countries' systems. In Finland, the pension system is mandatory. It means that everything is stipulated by the law regarding the coverage and, for example, the age limits. Also, the retirement age is stipulated by the law, and how the pension accrues. Our system is decentralized, and it means that there are several administrators. Actually, as an employee or a self-employed, the crucial question for you is to know where you are currently insured, in which pension insurance company or fund, and then they will find almost everything about your pension history and insurance. We have no cap on pensionable income nor contribution. So if you make big money, then you will pay big contributions. There is one exception, however. It applies to farmers and self-employed because there is a cap in their system, and that depends on the fact that the state finances a lot of farmers and self-employed persons' pensions. But for employees, there is no cap on pensionable income. And our system is based on paid-up policies. It means that whatever you have accrued in pension remains in the system, and you cannot lose your accrued pension. And we don't have actually any waiting period, which is very common in many other countries. For example, in Sweden, you will have to be covered at least 12 months. In some countries, for example, in Italy, you will have to be covered at least for 20 years to be entitled to pension, but we have no such waiting period. Our waiting period is related to earnings when you're an employee, and then, of course, the validity of the pension insurance if you are self-employed. But we will come back to that later in this presentation. As I told you earlier, we have a decentralized system. This table gives you an idea of how decentralized our system is. There are several pension administrators. There is one for the public sector employees and officials, and that they have their own pension legislation called TyEL. And all the people who work for the public sector, meaning for the state or municipalities, in some cases even for universities and other state or municipality-owned companies, so their pension accrues according to the TyEL legislation. Mela is an authority which takes care of the farmers and grant recipients' pensions, which is stipulated in the MYEL legislation. Seafarers or seamen, they have their own special pension legislation, MEL, and there is this MEC Merimieseläkekassa, which takes care of seafarers' pension system. And what we're going to talk about today is this TyEL and YEL pension insurance, and it is a decentralized system. So there are several pension insurance companies and funds which take care of TyEL pension insurance, and Varma is one of them. So we insure all private sector employees and executives, even CEOs are subject to TyEL if they don't fulfill the criteria to be covered by YEL. And for self-employed, we have YEL system, which is also decentralized. There are several pension insurance companies, actually the same companies, which operate TyEL system. They also administer YEL system. And then there is also one industry-wide fund which also administers TyEL scheme for self-employed persons. Then there are a group of people who are so-called diverse groups. They are mainly subject to the UL legislation, and there are special rules, but we don't go into that group at all in this presentation. You might have heard that there is a Finnish Center for Pensions, Eläketurvakeskus in Finnish. ETK is also used, and they take care of the registry services. They provide actual services for all pension insurance companies and administrators. They develop the shared information system, and they also act as a liaison body in international issues. And they supervise all the employers and self-employed who should be subject to TyEL, YEL, but who have not organized the statutory pension insurance policy. And all these actors are being supervised by Finnish Supervisory Authority, Finanssivalvonta, FIVA. And now we will go into TyEL, which is Employees Pensions Act. And we start with the basics. So the legislation covers all employees, executives, and CEOs who work within the private sector. There is a lower age limit when you are subject to TyEL, and you will be covered by TyEL starting from the month after you have turned 17 years of age. And there is an upper age limit. Currently, we have people who are born 1958 to 1961. So they are subject to TyEL if they work in an employment relationship until they turn 69 years. And people who are younger, meaning born 1962 or thereafter, their upper age limit is 70 years currently. But this might rise since there has been a pension reform which will reflect to the retirement age over the upcoming years. And as I told you before, we don't have a waiting period, but our waiting period is actually an income limit. So you must have a salary in 2026, at least €71.22 in a month from one employer to be covered by TyEL. So for example, if you get €30 from one employer and €60 from another, combined, they make more than €71, but you are not subject to TyEL since this limit counts per employer, not by employee. And next, we will take a look at the pensionable income. I would have to say that the main rule is that all taxable income is mainly your pensionable salary. So any salary you get, overtime pay is subject to TyEL. All taxable fringe benefits, it's usually mobile phone. So if you get to use your company phone on private calls, then it's taxed €20 a month, and that €20 is also your pensionable salary. And sometimes you're entitled to company car or bike, or you might even be entitled to housing. In that case, the taxable value is also your pensionable salary. Holiday pay and holiday compensation at the end of the employment are also pensionable salary. With the holiday pay, we mean extra 2 weeks pay. Usually it's about 2 weeks pay a year, and those are based on negotiations. So if your employer is not organized, then you might not get this holiday pay. So it's not compulsory to pay holiday pay according to the legislation. It's based on trade union negotiations. But in case you resign from your job and you haven't had your holiday, then you will get compensated for the holidays in form of money, and in that case, that money is your pensionable salary. And also, when resigning a job, then you will get salary during the notice period. In some cases, you might have heard the term pylon, which means that you will get paid, but your employer says that you don't have to come and work until the last day of your employment. That is usually common if you transfer, for example, to a competing employer. So your present employer might not want you to work until the last day, but that's up to your employer to decide if you're going to have to work until the last day of your present employment or not. But there are exemptions. So when there is a main rule, there are also exemptions. So, for example, so-called golden parachutes or handshakes, as also called, they mean that your employment will be terminated on mutual contract instead of being instead of resigning from your job, or your employer telling you that in this case your employment will be terminated. Golden parachute is usually a situation where you get more money than you would in a regular situation, but also your employment will usually terminate by signing the paper. I mean, without any period, and that money is considered as indemnity, so that's not pensionable income. Especially in bigger companies, employees might get stock options or other kinds of investment based remunerations. So there are special rules in the legislations, and if the terms are met, that kind of a benefit, even if it's taxable, is not pensionable income. Also, any kind of reimbursement of expenses, or you can get kilometer or per diem allowances if you make business trips. As long as they are tax-free, they are not pensionable income. And next, we will take a look at the TyEL contributions. The full contribution in 2026 is 24.85%, which consists of employers and employees' share. The employees' share in this year is 7.3% of your gross income. Your employer is obligated to deduct your share in salary payment, and then we, as a pension insurance company, we will charge your employer based on your gross salary which your employer has reported to the incomes register. Sometimes it happens that the employer does not withhold your share, so legislation limits employers' right to withdraw your contribution retroactively. The reason to this is that, for example, when the time goes by, for example, if it has gone 10 months and your employer hasn't withdrawn your share of the of this TyEL contribution, in 10 months' time, this 7.3% is actually 73%. And since employer is also obligated to withdraw the tax, you would not get any salary at all. So therefore, employer can withhold only what they have not withhold with the latest salary payment, and that can be withheld in the upcoming 2 salary payments. And as an employee, your whole Social Security is based on your TyEL salary. So it means that if you get sick, you will get sickness payment benefits from Kela after 10 days. So Kela's sickness benefits are based on your gross salary, which is subject to TyEL. If you become unemployment benefits are based on your TyEL income. First of all, there is a regulation for the employment, how long you must have worked with a certain level of income to be entitled to unemployment benefit. But then also, if you want to get earnings-related unemployment benefits, in that case, you will have to join a unemployment fund and pay separate contributions for earnings-related unemployment benefit. Your parental allowances from Kela are also based on your salary. And should there be an accident at work or on your way to work, then all those compensation is based on your salary as an employee. And next, Lotta.
Yes, so as we mentioned before, self-employed persons are also subject to the Finnish mandatory pension insurance system. And the pension insurance law that applies to them is the Self-Employed Persons Pension Act, and that is called TyEL in Finnish. So it's not always clear who is considered self-employed for the purposes of TyEL. Here are some characteristics that distinguish self-employed activity. So self-employment, as opposed to employment, is characterized by independence. Also, for example, self-employed persons are personally responsible for correcting their mistakes. And generally, the fee that the self-employed person invoices is higher than the salary that the employed person would receive for the same work, because the self-employed person is responsible for insurances, for example. But we'll talk later more about the distinction between these two groups and also how it is decided which pension insurance legislation is applied to a certain situation. So there are different forms of self-employment that all fall under TyEL. Here are some examples. So first we have so-called light entrepreneurs and freelancers. So these are people that don't have a company and often don't have a business ID either. Light entrepreneurs conduct their invoicing through an invoicing service, and freelancers get paid a non-wage compensation for work they do to work providers. And it's important to note that both people that work through an invoicing service and also freelancers can be considered employees rather than self-employed persons. So bearing in mind the characteristics that we just talked about, the people are considered self-employed when they work independently and when they seek their contracts or assignments by themselves. The second example that we have is the sole trader, and they are also considered self-employed under YEL. So this is a person that has a business ID, but for the purposes of YEL, also the spouse of the person with the business ID is considered self-employed if they also work in the same business. Then in terms of a general partnership, the partners to that partnership are considered self-employed. And as for a limited partnership, the responsible partner is considered self-employed for the purposes of YEL. And then lastly, we have the limited liability company. So a person who works in a leading position in the company and owns personally more than 30% of the shares or votes in the company, or owns together with a family member more than 50% of the shares or votes in the company, is considered self-employed under YEL. Now, what this leading position means is, for example, the CEO or a board member, but generally the deputy board member, for example, would not be considered a leading position, so that person would not be insured under YEL. So if a person is considered self-employed for the purposes of YEL, they would be obliged to take out YEL insurance if they also fulfill these criteria. So as with TyEL, there is a lower age limit. The self-employed person must be 18 years old, and the obligation to insure also starts on the first day after the calendar month during which the self-employed person turns 18 years. There's also an upper age limit, which is the same as with TyEL, so 69 years for people born between 1958 and 61, and 70 years for those born after 62 at the moment. So importantly, as we mentioned, YEL also has income limits. So a person that has a YEL income of more than 9,247 euros in 2026 is obliged to take out YEL insurance. And there's also an upper income limit. So the highest possible YEL income this year is 214,000 euros. And I will explain what the YEL income means in a bit. Now, lastly, only self-employed activity that continues for 4 months is considered or is insured under YEL. So this might be a little bit harder to determine if you're a person that does short individual gigs as a freelancer, for example. But generally, if you intend to keep working and you have around 4 gigs in a year, or if the gigs that you do take up more than 4 months in a year, you would be considered a self-employed person under YEL. So if you're unsure about whether your work is considered continuous in this matter, or if you're unsure about any of the other criteria for that matter, we encourage you to contact Varma and we can help you assess the situation. So once you are satisfied that you fulfill the criteria that I just talked about, you should take out a YEL insurance. As we mentioned, self-employed persons are free to choose whichever authorized pension provider themselves. When you're taking out a YEL insurance, you have to determine the start date. And the start date is the state date is the day that you started your self-employed activity subject to YEL. And this means that your YEL insurance should start on the day that you fulfill all the criteria that we just talked about. This is usually the day when the self-employed person starts working in their company. But for example, if the business activity is very small scale at first, the obligation to insure might start later. Importantly, even though YEL requires the self-employment to last longer than 4 months, this does not mean that only the self-employed activity after the initial 4 months would be insured. Your insurance has to start from the beginning of your self-employed activity. So from when you start working as a self-employed person for the purposes of YEL, you have 6 months time to take out the YEL insurance. And self-employed persons are personally responsible if they fail to take out YEL insurance in this time period. If they fail to take out a YEL insurance in the time period, they might be subject to a penalty. And the penalty is at least 10% of the amount of YEL contributions that the self-employed person would have paid if they had not neglected to pay their contributions. Now, the pension insurance company can also decide not to impose the penalty if they don't consider the neglect to be intentional. Since the YEL insurance is mandatory and based on law, the Finnish Center for Pensions, so the ETK, oversees whether one is taken out. And ultimately, they can take out a YEL insurance for a self-employed person for the at the expense of the self-employed person. In these cases, the penalty is 30% to 100% of the contributions during the period of neglect. So once a pension insurance company has granted the self-employed person a YEL insurance, they are obliged to keep it in force and valid for as long as the self-employed person works as an entrepreneur for the purposes of YEL. Now, there might, of course, come a time when the self-employed person stops working as an entrepreneur for the purposes of YEL. And in these cases, the YEL insurance would be terminated as of their last working day. Now, this might happen if a person stops working as a self-employed person altogether, or if they stop working for a significant amount of time. For example, if they're going to have a longer sickness leave. We would usually consider a break of a few months to be significant enough for the YEL insurance to be terminated, but we assess these cases on a case-by-case basis. Now, the YEL insurance can also be terminated if the self-employed person no longer fulfills the criteria for YEL insurance. For example, if the ownership of shares in the company changes so that the person no longer owns more than 30% of the shares, the YEL insurance could also be terminated. And lastly, also if the YEL income of the self-employed person falls below the legal minimum level, the YEL insurance can also be terminated in that case. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about seasonal self-employment more specifically. So the general rule is that if a person works as a self-employed person year after year, they should have a continuously valid YEL insurance throughout the year, even if there is a break of some months in the self-employed activity every year. So, for example, if a person runs an ice cream kiosk from the beginning of June to the end of August, so for 3 months every year, they would generally have to have a valid YEL insurance throughout the whole year. If the other requirements for YEL insurance are met, most importantly, if their YEL income can be deemed to be over the legal minimum. So finally, I've mentioned the term YEL income a few times, but what does it actually mean? Whereas for employees, the basis of pension accrual, social security benefits, and insurance contributions is their salary. For the self-employed persons, it's this YEL income. According to YEL, the YEL income should equal the annual value of your work input, meaning it should equal the salary that you would have to pay an outsider with the same skills and knowledge that you have for the work that you do as a self-employed person. So this means that the YEL income is not the profit that your company makes, nor is it your taxable income or your salary. The YEL income is always determined on an annual level, but it is not determined for one calendar year. It might be easier to think about the YEL income on a monthly level. So it might be easier to determine a monthly salary that would equal your the value of your work input, and then multiply that by 12, and you would then get an annual YEL income. And here again are the minimum and maximum YEL incomes in 2026. So here are some examples that might help you understand YEL income. So if the value of your work input is 1,000 euros per month, your YEL income would be 12,000 euros. Importantly, even if your YEL insurance began in the middle of the year, your YEL income would always be 12,000 euros and not, for example, 7,000 euros if you started at the beginning of June. Now, if the value of your work input is 500 euros per month, your YEL income would be 6,000 euros, and this is below the legal minimum, so you would not be obliged to take out YEL insurance. Now, if you are a seasonal entrepreneur and you have business activity for 6 months every year, and the value of your work input during the 6 months is 2,500 euros per month, your YEL income would be 15,000 euros. So that's 6 times 2,500 euros. Now, how do you actually determine the value of your work input? The pension insurance company that grants you your YEL insurance will calculate the YEL income on an individual basis. But here are some of the factors that they will consider. So the basis for the calculation is the median salary of employees in the field where the self-employed person works. And as a general rule, if the self-employed person works full-time and their business activities are around the level of the median business activities in their field, their YEL income should be around the median salary. The other factors that would be considered would include the self-employed person's work input. So, for example, their working hours. Also, the YEL income of a very experienced and highly skilled self-employed person would be higher than that of a newly self-employed person. Also, the extent and the scope of business activities matters. So if the scope is very large, meaning, for example, that the self-employed person's company has a high turnover in comparison to the median turnover in their field, if the person oversees a lot of employees, or if they work in multiple companies, their YEL income should also be high. And the pension insurance company will also consider other factors which impact the value of the self-employed person's work input. So these would include, for example, the nature of the self-employed person's tasks in the company. And as I mentioned, the determination is always done on an individual basis. Now, this can all seem quite abstract. So the pension insurance companies use this YEL income calculator as a tool in determining YEL incomes. The calculator is used by all the different pension insurance companies, so it also ensures that the determination of YEL incomes between the companies is equal and similar. The calculator uses data about the median turnover of companies in certain fields and also the median salary of the employees. And the data comes from Statistics Finland and the Finnish Tax Administration. Now, how the calculator works is the self-employed person gives an estimation of their turnover or gross invoicing for the next 12 months. They would then choose their business sector from the list, and the calculator would then give a YEL income recommendation and a margin of 30% up and down. Now, this calculator naturally has only considered two of the factors that I just talked about, the median salary and the scope of the business activities. So the recommendation might not actually describe the value of the self-employed person's work input. The self-employed person can apply for any other YEL income deviating from the recommendation, but if the YEL income that they are applying for is something different, they would have to give some additional information about their work input. Now, there can always be changes in the self-employed person's business activities which impact the value of their work input. And in these cases, the self-employed person should remember to apply for a change in their YEL income. And the pension insurance companies also review the self-employed person's YEL incomes every 3 years. As mentioned, your YEL contributions are determined by the level of your YEL income. This year, the insurance contribution for self-employed persons is 24.4% of their confirmed YEL income, and the insurance contribution is fully tax deductible. Now, if your YEL insurance policy is valid for a full calendar year, you would pay 24.4% of the full YEL income. However, you only pay contributions for the time that your insurance policy has been valid. And each month that the insurance policy is valid equals 1/12 of the annual YEL income. So if the policy starts or ends in the middle of the year, your YEL income, as well as the contributions that you pay, are proportioned. Here's an example. So if your policy starts on September 1st and your annual YEL income is 24,000 euros, the base for your YEL contributions is 4/12 of the 24,000 euros, which is 8,000 euros. And so this is the basis for your insurance contributions in the first year, and also the basis for your for the YEL income according to which your pension accrues. Now, the same goes if the pension policy begins in the middle of a month. So, for example, if your policy starts on February 14th, the base for the first month's contribution would be 17/30 of a full month's contribution. Now, as a reminder, here are the situations where a person works as a self-employed person, but they would nevertheless not have to take out YEL insurance. So if the self-employed activities don't continue for 4 months, or if a person that does short gigs, if they have less than 3 or 4 gigs per year, and the time that the gigs take in a year doesn't total 4 months, the self-employment would not be subject to YEL. Also, if the self-employed activities are such small scale that the YEL income of the self-employed person would not exceed the legal minimum, they would also not be obliged to take out YEL insurance. And lastly, if you receive old age pension either from Finland or from abroad, you are not obliged to take out YEL insurance, but you can take out a voluntary YEL insurance if you'd like. And you can also take out a voluntary YEL insurance if your YEL income is below the legal minimum. Now, whether you are employed or self-employed, if you live in Finland, you will be sent a pension record every 3 years, and we encourage you to check it carefully. The record will list your salary from your employment, as well as your TyEL income and some benefits. And it will list these from the current year and the last 6 years. It will also show you the pension that you have accrued based on these. You can choose an online pension record rather than the one that is mailed to you by going online and checking your pension record. And the pension insurance company that is responsible for providing you the pension record depends on either your employer's pension insurance company or your pension insurance company if you're self-employed. But if you go to this website, that's tyeleke.fi, and you click on the link that says pension record, you would be directed to the pension insurance company that's responsible for your pension record. Now, once you have either received the record by mail or checked it online, you might notice some missing or incorrect data. If the incorrect data relates to employment from 2019 or afterwards, you should contact your employer and ask them to correct the data in the incomes register. And when the changes are made to the incomes register, Varma would get the updated information, and all the other relevant authorities would also get the information. If you notice any mistakes relating to any other information, you should contact the pension insurance company that is responsible for your pension record.
Well, as Lotta previously presented, there are sometimes uncertainty about the pension insurance legislation. Am I working as an employee or self-employed? And here are some characteristics which describe if you're working as an employee or self-employed. We actually have an employment contract legislation, which also is used to decide which, if the TyEL, meaning Employees Pensions Act, is applicable, or if the person is considered to work as a self-employed. What is characteristics for employees is that you are personally liable to do the work, so you cannot use an assistant or any other person cannot do the job that you have been hired to do. And usually employers direct and supervises your work. They will give you your working hours. They will tell you your working task. They usually school you to the tasks. And in many cases, employer is also reliable for all the tools and equipments. And they also pay for example, for the, if they have hired a building or other kind of premises, the employer pays for the other costs arising from the business activity. And therefore, employees are not reliable for example, for the loss of the business, and nor can they get any profit arising for the business activity. And what is characteristics for self-employed is that they usually use their own tools and equipment. In some cases, even employees can use their own tools and equipment. So this is not like, okay, now I'm self-employed because I use my own tools and equipment. It's not that straightforward. But usually a self-employed can choose when to work. They can decide if they take the assignment or not. They can use substitutes. They can hire staff. They can decide who works for them. And then they will also, they can decide when they do the job, and they are also responsible for all the costs and loss of the business. And naturally, they will get the company's profit. And we have some legal practice about different jobs, especially now in the springtime when people are applying for summer jobs. We sometimes notice these ads where people are applying for a job, and all of a sudden, in the middle of the process, they are being told that, well, actually, we will hire you as a light entrepreneur. Our legislation does not know any light entrepreneurs. You are either an employee or self-employed. So the legal practice has been given in these kind of situations. So if you work, for example, in a cafe or a restaurant or a shop, and you work and you get paid by hour, then there has been a lot of decisions given by the Finnish Center for Pensions, ETK, that in those cases, the person is actually in an employment relationship, and the employer is responsible for providing the TyEL pension insurance. Drivers, for example, if you drive a cab, for example, or you can drive a lorry, whatever equipment, but if you don't pay for the insurance, you don't pay for the fuel, you are not responsible for the service or fixing up the car, in that case, you are considered as an employee. Couriers, especially food delivery couriers, in this case, there has been different kinds of legal practices which are not consistent. Mainly, they have been decided that couriers, even though they have an app which gives them the jobs and no one directs them and they can choose if they take the job or not, they are, however, considered as employees, but still the legal practice is not really clear at the moment because there are very many kinds of contracts, and we're still waiting for new legal practice to be on the safe side. Maintenance work is the kind of a work which you can do either as an employee or as a self-employed. So the content of the terms and the agreement actually decides which pension law is applicable. So in case you're applying for a job and then you're being offered to perform the job as a light entrepreneur, we discourage you to agree with that kind of suggestions. And you are always entitled to contact the Finnish Center for Pensions, because by the law, that's the only institution which can give a decision which is binding both for you and employer, because you cannot decide or make a decision if you're working as a self-employed if it's against the employment contract legislation. And next we will take a look at the international situations. What is the main rule is that when you have a local contract here in Finland and work as an employee, then you are subject to the Finnish Social Security and your employment will be covered by TyEL. So your employer is responsible for taking out the TyEL policy, reporting your salary to incomes register, and pay the TyEL contributions. But there is an exemption which applies to persons who have received an A1 from another EU or EEC country, or another a certificate which is similar to A1 from another country, in those cases, Finnish Social Security is not applicable, at least not Finnish pension insurance. But for self-employed, it's not just enough that you work here within the Finnish borders. You will also have to have your permanent home here in Finland to be covered by YEL. However, we do not expect you to have your permanent home here in Finland if you have your permanent home in another EU or EEC country. For example, an Estonian self-employed person who lives in Estonia, has his or her family living there, but works as a self-employed only here in Finland and does not perform any other work in his or her home country. In that case, YEL policy is applicable if the other criteria are met, as Lotta previously described. Today, many people want to work remotely, even from abroad, outside Finnish borders. And if you are an employee, I will strongly advise you to contact your employer before you start working abroad, because it can have a significant impact on your Social Security. EU regulation makes it possible for persons who simultaneously work in 2 or more member states. Member states include also the EEC countries. In those cases, a person can receive, or actually is obligated to apply for an A1 based on simultaneous work in 2 or more member states. And if an A1 is issued by the Finnish Center for Pensions, Finnish Social Security is applicable and you remain under the Finnish Social Security. But you cannot get an A1 if you work simultaneously in Finland and in another country outside EU, EEC. And if you start working outside Finland, even for a Finnish employer, you must get this A1 certificate from the Finnish Center for Pensions, because that's nearly only option for you to remain under the Finnish Social Security and under Finnish pension accrual while you work abroad. And then we will take a look at the other situations which regard posted employees and self-employed persons who come to Finland being sent by their employer from another country. So employees coming from other EU or EEC country and having this E1 certificate from their previous country, they remain subject to that country's Social Security, and they will not be insured here in Finland at all. Because within EU, it's all or nothing when it comes to Social Security contributions and Social Security benefits. But if you are a posted employee from a non-agreement country, it means that, for example, a non-agreement country, I would say South Africa at the moment, Ukraine, even Russia. So if you work here less than 2 years, you are exempted from TyEL insurance. And then your employer can apply for an exemption up to 5 years from the Finnish Center for Pensions. And if the exemption is granted, in that case, you will not be subject to Finnish pension legislation. But if ETK does not issue the exemption, in that case, you will be covered by TyEL retroactively from the first day you started working here in Finland, considering that you must have worked here more than 2 years. And if you come to Finland from another country outside EU, EEC, we have Social Security agreements, for example, with USA, Canada, China, India, South Korea. It means that you can get similar to A1 certificate. And usually it means that you will not be insured according to Finnish pension laws here in Finland, but other Finnish social security might be applicable to you. And it all depends on the contract. And in these cases, you might even have a local employment contract here in Finland for immigration reasons. But if your actual employer remains in the country where you're coming, in that case, you will not be subject to TyEL insurance, nor YEL if the agreement covers even self-employed people. And if you have accumulated pension from abroad, you cannot transfer it to the Finnish pension system. So your accumulated pension remains in that system. In some countries, it's possible that they will pay out your money when you leave the country. But for example, within the EU, EU regulation puts limits on situations where you can pay out the accumulated pension funds in advance. And each country handles their own pension accruals, and they have their own legislation. For example, retirement age can be very different from one country to another. So when you're entitled to old age pension, for example, here in Finland, is not the same age limit in another country. And if you want to know more about the pension that you have accrued abroad, in that case, you will have to contact the pension authority in the country where you were insured. So I hope you have found this information useful and enjoyed our company. And we wish you a nice day, and you are welcome to contact us if you have any questions relating to your pension insurance here in Finland. And I would like to remind you that tomorrow morning there is another webinar, Pensions in Finland. It will be held at 9 a.m. And there you will learn more about pension benefits, pension accrual, pension application procedure. So you're welcome to join that webinar also. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.